United States strained relations and recurring conflict with Iran goes back decades.
So how have we gotten to this point with attacks being traded and fears of a regional issue turning into a wider war? To give us some context on the history of U.S.-Iran relations, we are joined by historian and author John Ghazvinian. Thank you so much for being with us, John.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, we wanted to have this conversation because we said so many people are seeing these headlines, and if they haven't been keeping up with the news for decades, they probably don't even understand the history of the relationship between the U.S. and Iran. They've been in conflict for decades, but there was one point in history, you got to go back a while, They were once close. Take us back to maybe the Islamic Revolution in 1979 and how that changed relations between the countries. But if you think there's a better starting point to explain how we got here, please start there.
Sure, of course. I mean, the history of the United States' relationship with Iran is very long and very rich, and it actually goes back, a couple of centuries. But in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, the United States had a very close strategic relationship with the ruling regime of Iran at the time, the regime of the Shah, the king of Iran. Iran had a monarchy dating back a couple of thousand years. But the last king of Iran was increasingly authoritarian and increasingly unpopular. His regime was very closely associated with that of the United States. So when the people rose up in a massive revolution in 1979, initially it was not an anti-American revolution, but it went in that direction after President Carter gave refuge to the Shah when he fled Iran during the revolution. And a bunch of revolutionary radicals overtook the American embassy and took Americans hostage for over a year. That hostage crisis became the reason for the break in relations between the United States and Iran in April 1980. And since then, in 46 years, the two countries have had a very tense relationship, a kind of bitter, low-grade Cold War. There have been moments of potential rapprochement, but there have also been moments of great tension, and this, of course, is the greatest moment of tension of all.
Right, and we've seen different leaders take different stances. In 2013, President Barack Obama started talks with Iran that ended with a nuclear deal. In 2018, then, President Trump withdrew from that deal, put sanctions back on Iran. Can you talk about how we have seen relations change under these different leaders and what you think the future may hold there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, every president has had a different kind of relationship with Iran. Actually, it was Ronald Reagan who in some ways, came closest to quietly repairing relations with Iran by secretly selling them weapons in the 1980s during the Iran-Contra affair. But after that, things went into kind of a deep freeze for a while. There were a lot of tension during the first Bush administration. Iran secretly helped the United States to defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan. But tensions were still very high. Hardliners in Washington became more and more interested in regime change in Iran. Obama's election kind of put a pause on that. He really wanted to try to find a more constructive way forward with Iran, and was able to do so with the landmark, historic Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, known as the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. But of course, Donald Trump withdrew from that in 2018. And since then, tensions have continued to escalate, and that has brought us to where we are today.
And speaking of today, part of the conversation is that Iran could withdraw from the international accord that seeks to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. This is called the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which I think people have been hearing that, but most people have no idea what that is. I know it's been around since the 70s. So what is it, and what would it mean if Iran withdraws?
Yeah, the NPT, Iran was one of the original signatories of the NPT in 1968 under the Shah's regime, and the Islamic Republic, since the revolution, has never pulled out of the NPT. They've always followed, their strategy has been to take a relatively legalistic approach to negotiations, to say, listen, we're within the letter of the law, we're not doing anything illegal. Every country has the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. Of course, there have been some concerns about the extent of Iran's centrifuges, the extent of its enrichment. There's a gray area that the NPT doesn't really cover. And of course, because Iran's relations with the United States are very tense, there's been a lot of mutual mistrust. And we've had 20 years of this kind of back and forth about Iran's nuclear program. They were really, Donald Trump came into power this time around really wanting to do a kind of a stronger, better deal than Obama had done. And there was some really promising negotiations taking place until the Israelis decided to bomb Iran a couple of weeks ago.
Right, and that is where we stand now. Well, John, we appreciate you explaining all of this.
We could go on for hours and hours.
I know, there's so much history there, but thanks for giving us a little bit more context to all that we're seeing right now.
Of course, thank you.